Hello there everyone and welcome to another Victoria 3 Developer Diary. Before we get into all of the stuff about the cost of war, which is the topic of today's diary, I just want to point out that this is my favorite loading screen. This is legit amazing. I love it. I absolutely love it. Looks like Prussian general leading his troops and across the battlefield does someone else's troops. I mean, you know, it just looks awesome. Like, this is, of the ones we've seen so far, easily my favorite. But, you know what? How about you tell me in the comment section below which one you've liked the most? As well as your comments about this dev diary. But, like, which one of these have you liked the most? Because this one, it's got to be up there. It's got to be up there. Anyway, before we get into the dev diary itself, we'll have a look at the Twitter teaser put out by Martin over on Twitter. And it's here, it's this. Our series of Paradox Victoria Warfare Dev Diaries continues tomorrow when we take a detailed look at the cost of war. Your teaser for this week, the different laws governing how your army can be organised, so we can potentially organise into either peasant levies, a regular army, a national militia, and some mass conscription. It looks like there is a approval rating there, so maybe your interest groups are going to be more or less in favor of various different types of armies, you know, how the organization is. Maybe the rural interest group is not a big fan of peasant levies, or maybe they are in favor of peasant levies. Who knows? Like, there could be some interesting interplay going on there with the interest group system. So how about we have a look at the dev diary and see if that is, in fact, the case. Here we are. The cost of war. And again, we just got this glove. Oh, it's so nice. It's so nice. I can't help it. It's so nice. All right, let's get into it. Let's see what we have. Let's see what we have. I'm interested. Today marks the final entry in our 4-part overview of the warfare mechanics of Victoria 3. So, I'm just gonna, like, I've read this dev diary already. I just want to point out, this is just not accurate. It's just straight up not accurate. This is not the final entry, because I know what the next dev diary is. It says it later in the dev diary, and it absolutely fits into the idea of warfare mechanics. I don't know why they put this final part. It just ain't true. It just ain't true. I'm sorry. I don't know. It just ain't. If you're just tuning in now, we have previously covered the concept of war fronts and generals and navies and admirals, which introduces many of the core concepts fleshed out in this diary. And of course, if you have missed those, I've made videos on all 3 of those, and also a few more videos on them, because there was a lot to talk about. That war costs substantial money and resources is hardly a novel concept. Most strategy games impose a cost for creating military units. Some have upkeep costs, and even in popless grand strategy games, a metric such as a manpower pool often has to be regenerated in order to replenish damaged units. A few games can even encourage you to peace out of wars that are so costly your treasury can't bear the expense for as long as it takes to win, even if you still have armies left standing. I would say probably CK2 is the one that best emulates that, more so than CK3. Raising your army in CK2 was monstrously expensive. So yeah, that you couldn't last for too long with that one. So yeah, I think all of them kind of have elements of everything there, right? Having armies cost money. That's in pretty much every Paradox strategy game, right? Other than, well, like, everything costs money, but I'm sure there's probably some situations where the upkeep of this is free for whatever reason. Manpower pools, like Stellaris doesn't. Victoria 2 doesn't. The Crusader King series doesn't. But they also don't have pops, so yeah. But let's be honest, pops are the best grand strategy games. Pops are it's an amazing system. We're glad, we're happy that Victoria 3 is going with one. Anyway, let's move on. Let's have a look at what we've got here. In Victoria 3, we aim to take this to the next level by modelling the truly astronomical, often lasting expenses of war in an economic system. This includes letting players and pops profit off of wars, employ economic tools such as trade disruptions to gain military leverage, encouraging upgrading not only your military but also industrial output to match. Reform your laws to fit your military to your economy, ensure your infrastructure is sufficient to maintain your country while at war, and invest in medical corps and medicine to treat your population traumatized by the front lines. That all sounds pretty good. That sounds like a concept that I can absolutely get behind. Let's hope the mechanics live up to the concept. The intention here is not only to give the player a lot of economic levers to pull to prepare their country for war, although that certainly is a big part of it. A big reason for making wars approach the real-life cost is to encourage the player to think hard about the opportunity cost of war. That is, what you're missing out on by spending your resources on war instead of something else, and incentivize solving your diplomatic conflicts before war breaks out. One of the pillars of the game was everything that can be gained by warfare should be able to be gained by diplomacy instead. That's the whole reason we have this diplomatic play system, which still I've got absolutely zero problems with. I think diplomatic play system is absolutely masterful. And yeah, having, you know, the opportunity cost be a big element of warfare is a big deal. Do I spend my money on raising these troops and fighting this war, or do I spend this money on a decent healthcare system, the USA? You know, there's very much opportunity costs going on right now. If war was a cost-effective way of both increasing your power and decreasing your enemy's power, diplomacy would be relegated to nothing but faux formalities before fighting begins. But if neither party truly desires a war, no matter the power discrepancy between them, that's when the diplomatic play intimidation game to see who blinks first can become real and tense. Yeah, neither country actually desiring war is a really interesting concept, because it doesn't exist in like any other Paradox game. It's like war is kind of the be all and end all of the other games. That's what you aim for. I guess Stellaris maybe not, but once you've reached a certain point in Stellaris, there's no more expansion to do. There's no more exploration to do, and warfare is that next step until at least the galactic community thing came out. Then you had other things to work on, and warfare could be, you know, absolutely secondary there if that's the way you decided to play. But definitely it seems like warfare, I'm going to be honest, I mean, again, I'm not a big fan of the way that warfare is in Victoria 3. There are things that I would add and change to it if I had control. I'm not really satisfied with the current implementation. So knowing that there's, you know, a way out of that, and I can get everything that I want to via diplomacy instead of just by war, this is pretty good to me. Yeah, I don't desire war because war doesn't seem fun in Victoria 3, which I guess is in a certain light that can be deemed a positive. Now, neither my country nor me, the player, desires to interact with the system. Yeah, so diplomatic plays, absolutely love them, and yeah, good stuff. Yes, I like it. It also means that it's a skill to know when to stop. If a war was all or nothing affair, this would not be an issue, but in Victoria 3, wars rarely result in one side getting everything they asked for, as we will learn more about next week when we cover the peace deal system. And this is what I'm talking about. I read this. You know, peace deals are coming next week, and I'm thinking, yeah, but hold up. Surely peace is, you know, the end point of war, and therefore deserves to be a part of a 5-part overview of warfare mechanics. Hey, tell me if I'm wrong there. Isn't peace like the ultimate goal there of war? Right? You know, you don't do perpetual wars. Peace has got to be in there somewhere. Once you've hurt your enemy good enough, you might accept a consolation prize and sign a truce, knowing you'll recover better over the next 5 years than they will. Yeah, this is a big thing in multiplayers especially, that you might have the edge in one war, but it's going to be absolutely crippling, but you know that your enemy recovers faster than that's when, you go into the death war, because you need to beat them here. Because if you don't beat them here, they will just balloon and you will suffer. And I think Victoria 2 does that better than any other game because of the way that accepted cultures work. And right, if you've got more accepted cultures in your nation versus your enemy's nation, or more potential accepted cultures through the decisions, then you know that you have got more potential as a country, and maybe piecing out early so that you can realize that potential before going in later again is maybe something you might want to consider. So yeah, it's I'm liking this idea so far. So let's dig into the details, and we got an image here. Your ability to sustain your war machine is of crucial importance in peace as well as war. At the start of the game, many countries can get away with maintaining an army of self-supporting irregular infantry to keep the costs of arms down, but this won't be possible for long. And while wages might be affordable when your country is underdeveloped, increased productivity and labor competition will eventually raise expectations. So this country here, it looks like it's the Ottomans, judging by the map. Which is looking better, by the way. I think it's just tweaks on shading, maybe, but it's looking better than some of the early screenshots for sure. And we can see the cost of their war, right? They're spending a lot of money, £28,000. I believe that's per week on artillery. That is an extortionate amount of money, and that is all of the money. I believe. Yeah, it's the same, right? So how much you're spending on your barracks, and then this is the breakdown of what you're spending in your barracks. This is how much you're spending in your naval bases, and this is, the breakdown of that as well. So I think the Ottomans really could do with creating its own artillery industry instead of, I assume, importing the artillery. Because, Lord, that is an expense and a half. Absolutely. And if they manage to, bring this cost down, then their war might actually, will still be able to run a profit. So, your country's army model is a type of law that governs who makes up your military and how they are organized. Currently have 4 army models planned, and these are the ones that we saw in the Twitter teaser. Under a peasant levy model, a permanent military force supported by barracks is non-existent or minimal in size. Instead, the country may raise large numbers of conscripted levies of irregulars during wartime, led by officers originating from the aristocracy. This model is cheap to maintain during peacetime, but can get very expensive, particularly in lives, during war. Conscripted battalions can also take a long time to organize and provide no power projection that affects the country's prestige. And the reason this would be very expensive during warfare is both because peasant levies are less trained and therefore die in larger numbers during battles, this is the logic I'm going with. I don't know the mechanics behind how they fight, but this is my assumptions. But also because these peasant levies are made up of the people who would be working in your factories creating products that drive the economy and give you money. So it's basically a double whammy, right? You've got a weaker military force, and to supply that military force, you're taking people out of the workforce. So it's real. You probably don't want to stick to the peasant levy too long. It's probably a bad idea. We have the national militia model. It limits your standing army and power projection in much the same way as peasant levies, but permits you to conscript a large part of your population into a well-rounded national defense force if needed. These conscripted troops cannot be mobilized and are therefore automatically assigned to their local garrisons, unavailable to generals to use as to advance fronts. It's a model of choice for countries who want to focus on homeland defense, or countries desiring to democratize the military and limit the power of the armed forces. I would wonder how you could possibly go on an offensive war in this, or go on the offensive in a war, right? If you just have the assigned to local garrisons, of course, they will fight when they are attacked. But you can't do an offensive action with a garrison. You don't have a general to give the advance front command. So it'd be interesting to see how this actually works in a war scenario. We have mass conscription. It becomes available once you've unlocked the society tech nationalism. It lets you enlist the same large number of conscripts as national militia, but does not limit the size of your standing army, and all these conscripts are assigned under generals as needed. In addition, conscripts are trained faster, but are limited to infantry troops only. This is the correct choice for countries fighting no-holds-barred existential conflicts where sending regular waves of fresh meat to the front lines is imperative. Maybe, is that a... Right, that's instead of the others. Okay. Having, say, a regular army and mass conscription makes sense. Having a national militia and peasant levy makes sense. I'm not sure why it's... Hopefully it's not one or the other, because I think all of these really could fit together, right? You could have a regular army. Let's read regular army first, and then we'll talk about that. So a regular army model lets a country maintain an army of any size, even in peacetime. While it also permits for conscription of a smaller number of civilians as needed, its standing army is the pride of the nation and confers considerable prestige upon it. This model has the greatest flexibility in terms of military production methods, letting countries configure their armies without restrictions. Technologically advanced countries relying on more expensive crack troops rather than sheer numbers favor this law. Okay, so the regular army can also conscript, I guess, less than mass conscription, but it can conscript people, right? Can conscript soldiers. But yeah, it seems like kind of they could all work together, right? They're already kind of working together with the regular army because of the conscription, but you could have a regular army and a national militia. You could have a regular army as this is the backbone of the army, and then during wartime we've also got this peasant levy, so we'll raise those as well. I feel like having, being able to have multiple should well, it's logical, I think, or it makes sense. Like all laws, changing your army model will be popular with some interest groups and not with others, and in most cases you need to have at least a semi-legitimate government that favors the law in order to have a chance to pass it without major complications. The icons you see for these laws are not yet finalized. So yeah, these are all identical law icons right now, but yeah, we'll see. Hard to really see what interest groups are supporting each of them. I mean, you can see on the sides though. So the national militia have the support of industrialists, I think, the rurals and intelligentsia. These icons are going to become so much more easy to understand later, right? Nobody's against having a national militia as well. Regular army, on the other hand, we've got the support of the armed forces and intelligentsia, but the rural peoples are against it. Not that their 13.1% even matters in the face of such overwhelming support. And it's currently enacting regular army, so it's going from national militia to regular army. That's what they want. All right. Okay. You can see as well the difference here, right? So national militia, of course, we learned up here that you cannot put them underneath generals, but can mobilize 745 battalions. That seems like a lot. Whereas the regular army, you can get 340 battalions. So you're reducing the size of your army, but you're really increasing the quality of it. So that's probably, it's I kind of feel like the regular army is going to be the de facto way any country is going to move towards. But I don't think it is as clear cut as that, right? I think there are situations where a national militia might win out. Anyway, moving on, we've got conscripting. The civilian population into military service is an option available to all countries, but only during wartime, or when the country is at threat of war, so when it's participating in a diplomatic play. Conscripted battalions do not project power and therefore do not impart prestige, and under some army models, they do not have access to certain advanced production methods that require specialized training. So I'm actually curious here, right? National Militia, we've got that law, it's set, it's done. These National Militia are garrisoning all of the barracks or all of the, the cities or whatever. We can then conscript on top of that at 20% conscription rate, as you can see here, and these troops can be put underneath generals. I feel like that's probably what we're seeing here. Whereas regular army, it can go under a general just fine, and we can supplement the size of our forces by some more conscription. I feel like that's definitely what we're looking at here. It would make the most sense and actually make National Militia, able to be used. Conscripts can be activated state by state or across all of your country at once. This is something that a lot of people would be very, very happy to hear, because one of the big problems with Victoria 2, especially, oh my god, playing China, especially if you're playing a high population nation, is mobilization is your entire, well, not your entire population, but you've got an amount of conscripts possible. You click a mobilization button, over time they will all be conscripted. Even if you don't need, right, you need something more than just your standing army, but you don't need 1,000 brigades, which China can easily raise. Then you would want something in between. Raising just conscripts in one area would be pretty perfect. And it seems like Victoria 3 can absolutely handle that situation. So that's, especially for people who plan on playing China, this is fantastic. Activating conscripts creates a conscription center in the state where the civilians are recruited into temporary military service, and the cost of these conscripts are only incurred as they become active. This means relying on conscripting civilians as needed can be a compelling strategy to keep the military budget down, but does not come without its own costs. So first and foremost, when the conscription center appears, recruited pops will leave their regular places of work en masse, which could cause major temporary disruptions to your nation's economy. It'd be nice if you'd be able to choose who is being conscripted. It's like I talked earlier about the Ottomans here, right? They're spending so much on artillery. I hope if I am conscripting the population, I'm not taking people out of factories that are creating artillery or creating small arms or creating canned food or creating, what was the other military good? Ammunition, right? I hope that is not the case. I hope we'll be able to, maybe a flag on different factory types is like, if you're making this, you do not get conscripted. Congratulations, you can continue working in this factory. Something like that would be really nice. So yeah, major temporary disruptions to your nation's economy. If the conscripts in a certain state happen to primarily originate from the lower strata of its underpaying lead mines, this will reduce output and thereby affect the glasswork and munitions plants that consume the lead produced in your market, which in turn will impact all its urban centers as well as your very military machinery. Yeah, I mean, that's one step below, the lead goes into the munitions plants. Which, if the lead goes down, then munition plants don't produce as much either. That's fine. I'm just hoping that the people who work in the munitions plant specifically don't get conscripted. If you have enough pops in the search of labor, this situation will correct itself over time as the lead mines rehire their lost workers. But in the long run, this simple action of initiating conscription in a single state will still mean a shift in wealth distribution, political allegiances, population distribution, industrial profitability, and so on. Even after a successfully prosecuted war, those men returning home alive may need to look for new opportunities to regain their old standard of living. Everything has consequences. That's super interesting. That is super duper interesting, because it's not like, you finished the war, go home, take your job back, and, continue working, right? These people are going to start out potentially unemployed. And it means having a large, jobless population sometimes might be, what you would desire if you're planning on going to war. Also, can we just, conscript the homeless, or not the homeless, the jobless, instead of conscripting people who are working on improving the economy? that could totally be a thing, right? Different conscription laws, right? That would be good. Some new army model laws, but just for the conscripts. Like, where do we take the conscripts? Indiscriminate could be, even the people in the munitions mines. It's like, different options. That would be cool. Secondly, conscripted battalions are always created from scratch, which can take a lot of time. This means they lose any experience gained in the last armed conflict as they stand down, while your standing army units will get more and more impressive over time. Soldier for soldier, conscripts give you less bang for your buck, which totally makes sense as well, for sure. Third, conscripted battalions are distributed among your generals by their normal rank-based proportions and aren't automatically mobilized as soon as they emerge. So, first, the conscript battalions need to be recruited and created from scratch. Then any conscript battalions assigned to mobilized generals must also mobilize in order to be able to leave for the front. As he explored in the Fronts and Generals diary, when such a large number of battalions are raised all at once, it's infrastructure that governs how quickly they will be able to get ready. So this needs to be taken into account when choosing where to recruit your conscripts. So somewhere with high levels of infrastructure is absolutely essential. While all of the above happens automatically with the press of a button, the impact can be complex and will be experienced over time. Choosing to activate conscripts in the populous but rural vineyard valleys of the Rhone will have a very different effect on France than activating conscripts in industrialized, well-connected Paris. So we got mass mobilization here. It may provide access to vast numbers of fighting men, but redirecting up to 25% of your capable workforce to the war effort, in this case 60 battalions, or the equivalent workforce required to staff around 12 levels of farms, mines, or manufacturing industries, could play a real number on your economy. These visuals are a work in progress, but demonstrates how the player functionally interacts with the map through the lens system, either through directly clicking on regions of the map or by selecting options from a list. Make sense? Like it? Also, I just want to point out one more thing, and that is, if we have a look just here, I know it's a pretty janky zoom that I've just done for you, it looks like the icon for the battalions has changed. It used to be some dude in a blue suit. It was kind of wishy-washy. Now we've got fucking redcoats, and as a self-proclaimed and proud, British Empire aficionado, whatever, you know what I mean. I'm British. I like redcoats. That's kind of the point I was trying to make there. Yeah, we got. This is so much easier to understand what it is because stands out more. It's great. I love it. Fantastic change. If that is indeed what we're seeing here, which I kind of think it is. So good stuff there. Absolutely. And we've got, obviously, the Ottomans are trying to conscript. So we're conscripting in states, and that would be the entire state here. Is this the breakup of provinces that we see? I wonder. Some of these look maybe a little bit too big or weird, like weirdly shaped. If that is the way, fronts are going to follow these paths, then what if you're coming from the north here and you manage to take this? Are you going to have this big fuck off salient here? That seems a bit awkward, no? Interesting. Or is it, can I choose individual ones here? I don't know. Maybe I just don't know. Fair enough. A very tangible cost is, of course, the actual money you're going to be spending on military goods for mobilized troops in the field. While barracks consume military goods at all times in proportion to the number of battalions it supports, units that are mobilized consume twice the normal maintenance level of goods. Not only does this double the quantity you need to buy, but it also puts a lot of additional demand on the goods, raising the price per unit as well. As long as they can keep their production levels steady, your domestic arms industries, munition plants, and war machine industries will see profits skyrocket off of this increased consumption of your mobilized troops. Yeah, I mean, and if the munitions plants and the arms industries and the war machine all, kind of have an ear in the government, You know, they could really be like, oh yeah, you know, you need to invade another country so we can get those that profit, and here I'll give you a bunch of money so that you'll do that. But yeah, that would never happen, right? Would never happen. It also means that other nations, allies or neutral parties, will see the sudden benefit of exporting arms to you. If you normally export military goods to others, you may wish to cancel these routes to keep prices down, while if neutral parties import arms from you, this may be a good time to embargo these goods. Every little bit helps your treasury and ultimately your frontline troops. Lovely stuff. So, trade routes crisscrossing the ocean are susceptible to your enemy's convoy raiding fleets. Until a patrol discovers them and sends them to the home base for repairs, such a fleet can do considerable damage to both your supply network as a whole, affecting all trade routes, as well as the supply of overseas generals. Yeah, this is still something I don't like. I don't like that it is so overarching. Like, a fleet raiding in the Mediterranean is enough to disrupt the efficiency of your trade with Brazil if you're playing as, you know, Portugal or England or whatever. It's just a bit weird. And to some shipping lanes in particular, possibly crippling your country's access to strategic goods like small arms or hard-to-find imports such as radios. Compromising a country's access to industrial, luxury, or even staple goods can also be devastating to their ability to stay in the war, as we'll learn more about next week. Alright. Convoy raiding fleets can also damage connections to overseas markets, for example by compromising the East India Company's connection to London. This could potentially devastate the economies of clusters of dozens of states who may have come to rely on such a connection to survive, particularly if their economies aren't locally well balanced, but are relying on cash crops or specialized manufacturing. We have an example here. So, many countries rely on foreign trade to supply them, not only with the additional arms they require during wartime, but also the consumer goods required to keep morale up on the home front in this difficult time. Ending up on the opposite side of your trade partners during diplomatic plays could be catastrophic for the war effort. On this screenshot, we can see the British used to supply the Ottomans with 100 units of artillery each week. But with Great Britain now siding with Russia, they will have to find a new trading partner as soon as possible, or try to hold off the Russians, despite an artillery shortage. Another potential crisis the Ottomans have to deal with is the imminent stoppage of a smaller number of liquor and an enormous quantity of luxury clothes, at least the latter of which is prone to make many wealthy pops feel this war might carry on at too high a price. And then we can see on the screenshot some suspiciously round numbers. This is the second Dev Diary in a row that we've had this phrase, suspiciously round numbers, which is suspiciously the same phrase I used quite a few times. Of course, it's not just me complaining about the suspiciously round numbers, but it's just suspicious that the suspiciously round numbers phrase is, you know, being suspiciously used. Suspiciously. I now can no longer say the word suspiciously. Fuck it, whatever. Anyway, yeah. So we can also see some round numbers. Some very sus round numbers of available versus required convoys. These are currently placeholder values, which will be replaced with values probably scaled to the number of units traded across the number of nodes. Love it. Fantastic. That is something I'm actually really happy to see. That, you know, we're not going to have available convoys. We got exactly on the dot 6,000 convoys. On the bloody dot. Absolutely. And, you know, we only need 5,100. Not 5,101, mind you. It's 5,100. I'm so happy that is going away, right? Because it means nothing, right? The difference between, you know, putting a 5 on the end instead of 0 or you know, just making it less rounded, it actually makes it harder to, you know, calculate the supply network strength, but makes it feel more realistic, and that kind of feeling is vastly important. So I'm really, really, really happy to see this. This is fantastic. So we've got the war with Russia has broken out. Russia is sided with Great Britain against the Ottomans, and yeah. So what we used to have here is luxury clothes, 200 units of per week. Yeah, 200 units of luxury clothes per week going to the Ottomans. We had liquor 50, and some artillery, 100 units of those. Now that, obviously, Russia and Britain have attacked the Ottomans can no longer import the goods here. So, you know, it kind of sucks for you if you're the Ottoman player in this situation. Also, we can see here, other countries' trade rate. We've got trade routes with Britain there, but other countries, there's 10 other inbound trade routes, which we could see the British player try and affect with their convoy raiding, and then there's 31, I assume that is outbound trade routes, which again, the convoy raiding could absolutely cripple the Ottomans in this situation. If you manage to, you know, bring that all down, crashing down, the Ottomans would be absolutely screwed. That kind of blockading of that many trade routes would be, I mean, it would be absolutely devastating. Absolutely devastating. So I think this has the potential to be a really, really good system. You know, because if you think about Victoria 2, defeating the Ottomans as the British, even though the British are the strongest power in the game at game start, defeating the Ottomans wasn't that easy of a task because the Ottomans are very localized, right? They're a very big empire, but it's all contiguous. And to get an army from Britain into the Ottoman land, you would actually have to go and land there. You have to have enough transports to start with, and then get those troops into the Ottomans' territory. You're never going to bring enough transport ships to have enough to defeat the Ottomans, right? It's just not going to happen. So a land war against the Ottomans as Britain is kind of silly. It's good. Thankfully, it's never been attempted. Right, Gallipoli? Whereas, alternatively, Britain could play to its strengths and just raid the ever-living shit out of the Ottomans' trade. And yeah, I have a feeling that, you know, economically crippling your opponent in this way may just well be the smarter play here. And that's fascinating, because that's kind of not the case in any other Paradox game. Like, I know last week I had issues with the naval system. Nowhere near as many as I had with the army system, of course. But one thing that cannot be denied is that this has the potential to be the most realistic naval system that Paradox has ever implemented in any of their games. And hell, realism in the army sense as well seems like more, yeah, it's more realistic than having standing armies of units on a map, right? So I'm really, really looking forward to seeing how this plays out, right? I kind of really want another AAR that kind of goes into this kind of war, right? Having this, well, my enemy's better on land than I am by like a lot, but that's fine because I'm better in the water and I'm gonna utilize that advantage to win this war. That's just not something you have in any Paradox game. So I'm really excited to see that. And as well, we can see it here. The Ottomans have 150 battalions versus the 100 of Britain. Of course, Russia's got more just because of Russia. But yeah, I mean, I totally see that being the way to play this as Britain, which I love. I absolutely love that. The goods, technologies, and in some cases, laws you have access to practically limit which military production methods you have available to you. These determine the composition of your army and navy, and both include upgrades and options. As always, this list is not finalized, but represents what is in the current build of the game only. So we have infantry organization production methods. It governs the organization and doctrines of your army's core fighting force. They consume mostly small arms and ammunition, and include irregular line, skirmish, trench, and squad infantry. Offense, defense, and training rate are the most commonly affected attributes. Alright, lovely. Changing the way your armies fight via production methods it's an interesting solution to, seeing how war is done. line would be your standard, like Napoleonic style of warfare, and then going through trench would be World War One, of course. Although trench warfare first came into effect in the American Civil War. Squad infantry is post World War One. It's kind of what we had in World War Two, for example. Skirmish being, of course, the interim between Napoleonic and Great War. Things like the Crimean War, for example, the Chinese Rebellion. I forgot the name of it. Taiping Rebellion? I think that's what it's called. Anyway, that rebellion. There's another war that springs to mind. That would be more skirmish focused. Maybe that could be irregular focused, actually. Yeah, either way. But yeah, that seems decent. That seems decent. We've got the artillery support production methods. So is this, you can have infantry organization and artillery support production methods in the same barracks, or is it one barracks is this and the other barracks is this? I kind of feel like you've got more than one production method in a barracks. I'd love to see a screenshot of a barracks. That would be really nice to see, actually. So production methods for the artillery support consume expensive artillery and ammunition to boost the offense, morale damage, kill rate, and devastation attributes of the battalions, cannons, mobile, shrapnel, and siege artillery that are represented. Okay, so we've got cannons, mobile cannons, shrapnel, siege artillery. Yeah, seems reasonable, seems fair. How big was artillery in World War One? I'm not sure that would count as siege artillery, would it? Maybe it would. Maybe it would. And then we have mobility options. It affects their ability to get around and scout the terrain, impacting their ability to do damage during an offense and capture larger amounts of territory at the conclusion of a one battle. Cavalry forces are the default, which can eventually be supplemented with bicycle messengers, and after the turn of the century, aerial reconnaissance or even an armored division supplied by late-game war machines industries producing airplanes and tanks. That's cool. It's interesting as well that tanks kind of took the position of infantry in Victoria 2, though they were both still viable. They did different jobs. Infantry was much better at defending, and tanks were much better at attacking. But if you defended with tanks, it was a silly idea not to do that. But now tanks seemingly are in the mobility area, which I'm kind of thinking is what you're looking at with your hussars in Vicky 2 to get the reconnaissance and reduce the enemy's dig-in rate, I think it was called. But yeah, having bikes there as well is really, really awesome. Airplanes in there as well, love it. I would assume that the Zeppelin would probably be in there as well, perhaps. Could be. Your standing army can unlock various specialist companies as well. This is cool. For barracks to focus on. These include machine gunners, infiltrators, flamethrower companies, and chemical weapons specialists. That's dope as hell. That's dope as hell. These specialists consume various goods to inflict quite specific effects. Then we also have medical aid. It determines what sort of battlefield medicine your troops have access to, from the default of wound dressing through field aid to fully fledged field hospitals. These consume fabric and opium to treat the sick and wounded to minimize the casualties inflicted by attrition and combat alike. So access to opium permits you to care for your injured population during wartime. But while the country is at peace, the excess opium floating around your market may result in pops developing an unhealthy obsession with the drug. This is less of a problem if you are the producer than if you're relying on imports for your supply, of course. Why is it less of a problem if you're the producer? Because if you're the producer, then unless you're able to export 100% of it, then there is going to be opium in your country. Weird. I don't know. So wound dressing also consumes opium. It'd be nice to know how much exactly first aid is costing you. And then field hospitals also requiring tools. I think this is our first image of small arms. I don't recall ever seeing that before. And it got ammunition there as well. Oh, and this is totally the barrack. Okay, all right. So I completely must have skimmed over this beforehand. You do absolutely have every single one of these production methods at the same time. So we've got the infantry there, the artillery, your reconnaissance, or your mobility specialists, and medical aid. That's really cool. I'm a big fan. I'm hoping the ability to have none would be a thing. And also, yeah, change the round numbers there as well, please. But yeah, I'm a big fan of that, and you can see the different. Oh, no, that's cool. That's cool. That's really, really cool, actually. So what you've got is, individual barracks can have troops of different qualities. If you wanted to make an army that was, really good at defending, like these guys hold the fucking line, you could probably set up your barracks to have that kind of army in mind, right? Whereas if you want, like, having that at the same time as having another barracks that is all about, infiltration, crack troops behind the line, cutting off enemy supplies and all that kind of thing, then maybe you could do something like that with specialists. Infantry going way down, artillery going way down, just having mobility, specialists, and just really, really hammering that home. Something like that could be really freaking cool. Fucking infiltrators are right there. Infiltrators you're not going to be doing too much infiltrating if you've got, big siege artillery behind you, and that's the only time this has potential. Honestly, I'm kind of coming around to the idea of not having armies on a map, right? I'm coming around to that. I still think generals need more, player input, because the 3 options we have are just straight up not enough. But I'm coming around to the idea of not having units on the map and going with this kind of system, because this kind of system has so much potential to be super realistic. There just needs to be a bit more player input, because this ain't enough player input for my tastes. I need a little bit more than that. A little bit more. Like, this is awesome, but this is not enough. More, please. Also, it looks like the navies are fighting here, which is kind of cool. Looks like the Ottomans are losing as well. Similarly, naval bases also consume goods to produce flotillas with different attributes. These are due for a design pass, so I won't go into details, which are prone to change anyway. But in broad strokes, the fundamental production method determines the class of the central vessel that defines each flotilla. I kind of wish this was renamed to squadron. I don't like the word flotilla. I don't know, I just don't. Squadron sounds... Maybe it's just my English bias, right? Maybe because squadron and flotilla are probably the same. They function the same, but like squadron just sounds better to me. Maybe that is my English bias. I don't know. So we've got, is this a man of war, ironclad, monitor, dreadnought, or battleship? Battleship would come before dreadnought, no? I would say it kind of looks like we're going up in tiers, right? The dreadnought absolutely came after the battleship. The dreadnought was a battleship, but kind of created its own class. You just got them in the wrong order. Whatever. It really doesn't matter. So in addition to the class of your central vessel, do you have submarines or even airplane carriers accompanying your fleet? All of these have pros and cons for different types of missions, letting you specialize your fleet for protecting or attacking trade routes, performing naval invasions, or blockading ports. Love it. That's actually really cool. I like it. I want to see that when it is, design passed, and we'll maybe come back to this and have a look again. That could be cool. If you've paid especially close attention, you might now ask, we know you must mobilize your army and generals to see effective use of them in warfare, but what about mobilizing your navy and admirals? In fact, navies are considered to always be ready and in active service and do not need mobilization. If we've paid especially close attention, we would know this, because this was in the previous dev diary. It was already there. We already knew that navies were always ready and in active service. Like, that was in the previous dev diary. Just saying. You also cannot recruit conscripts to start manning your warships just as a war breaks out for obvious reasons. It takes a bit more training than that for sure. This means expanding and upgrading your navy is both a long-term process and a long-term investment. Navies are excellent at projecting power, however, so while an impressive navy might not be particularly useful outside of armed conflict, it will at least grant you considerable prestige even as it burns its way through your treasury. Since navies do not cost any more during war than in peace, you might as well use them. You can set up most orders for your admirals anytime, even while at peace. Once they spot ships flying hostile flags, they will take action automatically. I think there should be another option here, right? I would argue that it is very likely, possible, and probable that navies did cost quite a bit more during wartime, because they would need to move faster, perhaps, to reach where they needed to be, and therefore they would burn more coal if it was an ironclad, or burn more oil if it is a later ship, the Dreadnought, for example. I would argue that there should be an increased cost for your navy, and that cost is in coal and iron. Not iron, coal and fucking oil. Or coal or oil. You know what I mean? While at peace, the amount of coal and oil you use would be reduced because, yeah, if you send your fleet to the other side of the world, say you're playing Britain, you've created a new flotilla in Portsmouth, for example, and this fleet is meant for the East Indies. Sailing that fleet, it doesn't need to go at full speed. That takes a lot out of the ships. You'd need more maintenance. You would be using more fuel to go the same distance, so you would not have it go quite as fast. I feel like that should be a thing. I think during warfare, if you've got a fleet in Portsmouth and it needs to be in the East Indies because you're fighting a war and, they need reinforcements, those ships are going to be going much faster. And if you're going faster, you're consuming more fuel. And I would argue you would be needing to do a little bit more maintenance. So you would need more tools and perhaps more steel to repair. I mean, that makes sense to me. So I would argue that navies should cost more during warfare than in peace. Not in monetary terms, although effectively everything is monetary terms, but in goods. You would be importing more fuel, or, you just need more fuel. Exporting less fuel so that you can supply your own ships. Something like that would be really cool. I think that is what I would love to see. I'm going to scroll up so you don't see this image just yet. A less direct cost of the war, which nonetheless can have severe consequences, is devastation. This reflects direct damage to an entire state and its infrastructure caused by battles transpiring in that state. Particularly large degrees of devastation is inflicted by battles involving heavy and sustained artillery barrages. Devastation directly impacts infrastructure and thereby market access, making the state economically unsustainable. It also tends to cause migration away from a state and increase pop mortality and other very detrimental effects. After the war, this damage will be gradually reversed, but the rebuilding effort can take a long time and cause a lot of economic upheaval in the process. So we have here an image of Wallachia and its surroundings before and after substantial devastation has been inflicted on the region. Numbers are, of course, work in progress. So we have, first of all, Bucharest is looking nice, is looking green, looking absolutely cool and fine and stuff. It's dandy. And then, oh no, war has broken out, and it is now very, very devastated. This looks great. This looks like exactly what I wanted to see from Devastation. Churned up mud. It doesn't look like the war is currently going on, right? It looks like either the war has ended or the devs have just, opened the console and put Devastation 100 or Devastation 74.8. Something like that has probably happened here. So we're not seeing Wallachia while they're at war, perhaps. While they're at war, I would love to see things like trenches and, explosions of the artillery going off, churning up the mud would be really cool to see. That kind of thing. But also, there's another thing I kind of hope for this system, and that is kind of a change to the mud. And I know this is kind of probably something that will change before release, of course, is things like lighting. I don't think the mud should be so reflective. There to the east of Bucharest, for example, is lots of white, and I don't know, it looks a bit weird. It's kind of the same issue that I had with CK3 with satin clothing. It just looked like people wearing bin bags. Here it's like it's just a little bit too shiny. If it's devastated, I want a little bit more grime and dirt and dreary darkness, right? I don't want this shiny shite, So other than that, like, this looks great. It's exactly what I wanted to see. But I just hope for maybe a little bit more pain and suffering, But otherwise, yeah, really, really impressive stuff. Finally, of course, there is the human cost of war. Some wars end with only a few hundred casualties on both sides. Some wars claim millions of lives with no peace deal in sight. In Victoria 3, it's your actual population who fight and die for your causes. The same population that harvest your fields and work at your assembly lines, who vote in their preferred party or rebel against your enlightened rule, who learn to read and write or pack up and move in search of greener pastures. Many men fall in battle, of course, but more commonly they perish on the way to battle, or after the battle, whether from disease, starvation, infections, or exposure. Simply mobilizing your forces to the front will increase their risk of dying or suffering lifelong disability. To counteract this, you can research and invest in good frontline medical care, or favor generals with proven ability to reduce such needless casualties. Those casualties who do not recover from their injuries and return to the front line will either return home as dependents or die outright. As a result of both of these effects, after a major war, your pops are likely to consist of an outsized proportion of dependents to workforce. While this will self-adjust over time, especially if birth rate is high, there may well be a post-war period where you're forced to deal with a large portion of your population not being economically productive. It's in cases like these that you'll be glad you enacted a good pension system to ease this impact during the recovery period. In closing, and to reiterate, Victoria 3 emphasizes the cost of war for several reasons, including it raises the stakes and thus increases the payoff of solving conflicts diplomatically. It creates meaningful economic interplays between the economy and military, increasing the need to prepare and build a reliable engine. And it enables the cost-benefit analysis as a strategic tool, making the best strategist not necessarily the one that uses overwhelming force, but also the one that uses just enough force to get what they want. Next week, we'll learn more about how you can leverage the effects of these exorbitant costs by making peace deals favoring you look relatively attractive to your opponent. Until then. Alright, awesome stuff. This is the big awesome, alright? We've had a few dev diaries in a row that were controversial, and some that were, that I personally was not in favor of. I don't think there's anything here that I disagree with, or that I find awful, or that I find that I think needs changing. I think all of this looks amazing. I really do. This looks exactly like what I wanted from a cost of war dev diary. Making war something that you might want to avoid because it kind of fucks up your country, that's really interesting. That's something I want to see, and this dev diary seems to be nailing that. I like the way that you set up armies as well. This production methods for barracks they're really cool. I really like it. I just wish I had more control over the army that it produces. I like it. I like everything I'm seeing here. This is really, really good stuff. And I'm so glad to be back on a positive note with Victoria 3 Dev Diaries. I really am. I've hated being so negative in the past few weeks. So I'm really happy to be positive again. Like, it feels good. It feels good to be happy. But I want to know what you guys think, so please do leave your comments in the comment section below. Are you feeling similarly happy as I am? Is there anything here that you've noticed that I haven't, that you are like, yeah, no, that's really iffy? If so, let me know in the comment section below. Subscribe if you want to see more Victoria 3 content. Apparently there is going to be another AAR like the one that I did about the Korean baby. Neon GT is planning on doing another one, so perhaps I will be reading that one out for you guys as well, perhaps. So, yeah, look forward to that. And, yeah, like button. That one's also a thing. But yeah, until next time, we'll have the next video will, of course, be the dev responses to player comments. Maybe there's going to be a lot, maybe there's going to be a few, but we'll go over them anyway and see if there's any clarifications that the devs make to various community comments. And yeah, that's probably going to be the next video in the Victoria 3 series. But until then, thank you so very much for watching, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye.